Welcome to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. This episode is the first in our Intergenerational Series, where we feature Corinne Lytle-Bonine and her mother, Nancy Lytle. Corinne is a vice president and director of environmental planning at Chambers Group and a senior project manager with over 16 years of experience. She has managed an array of NEPA, CEQA, and State Environmental Policy Act projects. Her passion and focus has been on environmental permitting and compliance for utility-scale renewable and low-carbon energy and transmission projects. She served on the Technical Advisory Committee for the County of San Diego's Comprehensive Renewable Energy Plan and currently sits on both the AEP state level and local level chapter's board of directors. Nancy has over 35 years of experience as a city planner and a community development manager. In November 2014, she retired as assistant vice president of Civic San Diego, a nonprofit agency established by the City of San Diego to perform economic and community development in targeted areas throughout the city. Prior to retiring, she worked as a vice president at the Southeastern Economic Development Corporation, an assistant director of planning and building for the City of Chula Vista, a planning manager at the San Jose Redevelopment Agency, and chief planning official for the City of Palo Alto. And from 2000 to 2004, she was elected to and served on the Palo Alto City Council. And a fun fact, both Corinne and Nancy graduated from UC Santa Barbara, which you will hear about more momentarily. We had a fun time recording this podcast, and we hope you enjoy it. Hi, I'm Jessa.
And I'm Laurel, and today's guests are a family. We have Corinne and her mother, Nancy, and welcome. We're so happy to have you. This is the first in our Intergenerational Series, but we will start as we always do. Each one of you, please tell us how you're connected to AEP.
So right now, I serve as the chapter director for the San Diego chapter, which covers San Diego and Imperial counties. I've been an AEP member for, pretty much the length of my career, which is approaching 16 years now, which was a bit of a shock when I wrote that in my bio the other day. So I've always been an AEP member, got connected to it as a student in college. AEP lifer.
And my only connection with AEP has been through my daughter. When she was the chapter president in San Diego, I would go to events that she was participating in and enjoyed those very much. But I was always an APA was the professional organization that I was affiliated with and participating in. I was a American Institute of Certified Planners was the career path I went in.
We won't hold it against you, Nancy, but
okay. We're already getting a taste of the rivalry, the family rivalry. All right.
I think you have another link in common. Speaking of college, didn't you guys go to the same university?
We did. Yeah. We are both ES majors at UCSB, but about 30 years apart.
Yeah, and I was one of the first ES majors at UCSB because the department had just formed from 3 different departments. It was made up of economics and biology and political science. And we had to write a thesis as undergraduates. And I was privileged to study under Garrett Hardin, which I know is a person who wrote some of the seminal texts that are used in ES departments across the country now.
And our acronym soup today is University of California, Santa Barbara.
That's correct.
Environmental science, right? Not environmental studies?
Studies. Yeah.
Oh, environmental studies.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Good. It's a helpful distinction because I did environmental studies and environmental science and studies are different. I love how you describe the origin of the program, combining economics and other resource areas.
Right.
Well, I'm going off script here, but how has it changed from the early days of Nancy and the new, more modern times with Corinne?
I think a lot of the information is similar, but how she was saying it was coming together of different departments. What it had evolved to by the time I went is they actually had an econ class that was specific for ES majors, a biology class specific for ES majors. So they had, I think, taken what they started and just, streamlined it a bit so that, especially with things like econ, calculus too, all of that was just geared towards not only, environmental studies, but I found it really useful in, making that next step to having a profession. So I think that was a change or an advancement for it. And I'm sure, now it's even more so since it's been a while since I was at school.
And I ended up doing a double major in geography and environmental studies. And the geography department at UCSB at the time was a NASA research unit. It was in the early 70s. They had just declassified a lot of remote sensing, and the satellites, Landsat, ERTS, were just starting to bring information back, and NASA was justifying its existence by doing a lot of applied research across the country, and Santa Barbara became a big unit for doing that research. So we were the that was how the San Andreas Fault was discovered. That's how plate tectonics originated, was looking from such a perspective that you could, see what was happening on Earth differently and manage Earth resources in a different way.
You're blowing my mind. Because when I went to University of San Diego and took Earth science, plate tectonics, and was like, what? And then they took us out to the Salton Sea.
Yeah.
And we got to see all the fault lines and the anticlines and the synclines and all the geology of the area. And I'm just, Nancy, thank you for sharing that NASA was a big part of UCSB. Wow. That I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And also did I'm assuming the undergrad environmental studies degree came out before the master's program that a lot of people have.
In fact, there was no master's. There was no graduate school at Santa Barbara. So the guy who ran the geography department, David Simonet, later became the dean of the graduate school for the campus. And but it was a very successful research unit. And then my husband and I met him there, and we both ended up working in New York for NASA Goddard Space Studies. He went to Columbia University for grad school, and got to work under as an intern, or I was a paid intern. I think they felt sorry for me, so they gave me a job. But I got to work under a very renowned climate research scientist whose name was James Hansen. And he became one of the foremost predictors of what we're experiencing today in terms of his research unit in New York was affiliated with Scripps, was affiliated with Boulder, several different places, all managed to put together tree ring data and other things to show us that climate change was happening with carbon release, and then to predict what we're seeing happen today, even at an accelerated rate beyond what they were what the climate researchers were predicting at the time.
So was undergrad being a gaucho your first introduction to the environmental industry, or why did you choose to study that?
Yes, that was my first introduction, was through that research unit, and CEQA had just been adopted, remember. So after working in New York for several years and moving to California, that was my first job, was writing an environmental impact report. And at that time, you pulled out the law and you read it, and then you put a little document together that was this thick, that was your environmental impact report.
Not anymore.
And of course, even during the 35 years I was in the industry or worked for public sector, obviously it grew to bookshelves and that type of thing. So it definitely expanded through time. But we wrote some of the first EIRs, those of us that came out of that department or others with similar training.
And for you, Corinne?
Oh, I mean, I've been going to planning commission meetings and city council meetings, like in womb.
That's the thing, in utero. I was like listening to Nancy. I'm like, I am hearing the foundation of like Corinne, and like you did not have a choice.
Like I think I learned my colors from like the City of Palo Alto. It was like zoning map.
Well, I used to have to put my girls, two of them, my husband traveled a lot, like about half the time. So I'd have to put them in a room, and the janitor would set up a TV with Disney movies while I had, like the planning commission in one room and the comprehensive plan advisory committee in another, and the architectural review board over there. And I'd just go from one to the other and try and keep it all.
And then it, of course, progressed where, then it was like, okay, like in, middle school, mom's going to be home soon when this meeting ends. Like, we're going to have to like clean up and like make everything appropriate when she gets home. And then like high school, it's like, okay, got to get like the friends out of the house because we know when mom's coming home. So definitely.
I love that you get to keep tabs on her because when that public hearing is, the agenda, what's been docketed. It's all very clear how long it's going to take. Well, and Corinne, jumping off that, how come you went down the environmental planning route instead of being a developer, for the people that are the applicants attending these planning commission hearings?
Yeah, I mean, it was whoever offered me a job first. After graduating, I went and volunteered in Peru for a year and came back with, like nothing in a bank account and wanted to live in San Diego because my boyfriend, now husband, was here. My parents were here. It was kind of the place to go. And then just, applied everywhere I could. And a consulting job was the first job I was offered.
And you met husband Jeff at UCSB too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're just doing everything that your mother did. Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's a family tradition. My dad's sister went to UCSB, met her husband there. My mom's sister went to UCSB, met her former husband there. So we're a lot of gaucho blood here.
Some good role models. Well, I love this. I love hearing all about the generational impact and influence. I think it's so cool. So like, Corinne, as you were growing up in this, this was your household and these were the discussions. And how did that, you said the consultant job was the first job you were offered, but how did that shape? Like, did you know this is just what I want to do? Or you see like, mom and dad do these things and I want to do this, or I don't want to do that type of thing?
Yeah, no, I definitely being exposed to it. And, I both positive and negative aspects of it. My whole life was always, took it into I care about recycling. I care, all of that. And then what I think kind of connected everything for me was my AP Environmental Studies class, where it was, the things that I kind of took for granted that you do hear at the side of a, dining room table with, okay, this is how it gets enacted. This is what you're trying to do. And then that was enough for me to apply for the environmental studies major at UC Santa Barbara, and then kind of never really looked back after that.
So it was high school?
Yeah.
I think that's so important to note. And I am assuming geographically, dependent, because I certainly did not have an AP environmental studies program in Oklahoma, where I was raised. But I find that to be like a really, really important catalyst for you to jump into that career. And I love that you said learning at home and then high school took it to another level where like, oh, this is how it's enacted in policy. This is how I see it playing out. And so what was a specific like regulatory climate or policy that was happening when you were in high school that was so inspirational and motivational to you that you're like, I'm going to dedicate my 4 years of undergrad to?
Well, the Palo Alto Comprehensive Plan played just a really, really big role because it took up so much of her time. And, we would help out with meetings. We would help out with, I think there's a photo of me and my sister or something actually in the plan, like skipping down the tree-lined streets or something like that.
We needed a photo.
Yeah. And then
that was the Palo Alto Community Plan, you said?
It's their general plan. It's just Palo Alto, so they needed to call it the comprehensive plan because they're unique and special. But I think it was a combination of that. And then my mom actually ran for and served on the Palo Alto City Council. So that was my freshman year of high school. And that was where I got exposed to the kinds of decisions that elected officials are making. And it was, really shocking to me to see that there was, many other people who served on the council with her that didn't have any sort of technical background in, the types of things that they're making decisions about. And that was, kind of shocking to realize that. So I think that was always kind of in the back of my mind, where more people need to learn about this stuff, because there's, not very many people making very big decisions that, aren't necessarily like in their wheelhouse.
That is a lesson for life. Don't we know it? Don't we know that decision makers often make decisions outside of their wheelhouse, and it's up to, the public to be inspired and engaged and educated. That's what I love about CEQA so much. I don't know what life was like before CEQA, Nancy. Could you share a little bit of what life was like back then, and maybe how things have been different in terms of engagement?
Yeah, it was adopted pretty early in my career, but I know that one of the reasons Santa Barbara was at the cutting edge is that they had a huge oil spill. That sort of triggered a lot of the activism in that community. So it was a catastrophic event that led to, and then they participated in San Diego, also got involved when some development was occurring along the coastline that people objected to because it was blocking public access. So a couple of laws were adopted very early while I was still, I think, in college, and that CEQA was one of them, and the Coastal Act and the Coastal Commission all came. In fact, I was fortunate enough, and I hope and pray that the sine wave goes back to this era of progress. And I'm hoping that the recent legislation that just peeked through our federal government is an indicator of that. But I was lucky enough to work in this field at a time when science was respected, and lots of good things were happening. The regulatory environment that was being created was very positive, and we saw things like the elimination of CFCs very quickly globally because people respected scientists. We saw, the preservation of coastal properties for public access, and that whole ethic coming online. We saw people getting excited about, Earth Day was, when I was in high school, I remember that was a big deal, celebrating Earth Day. And people raising their awareness about, what impact man has on the environment. And I took the turn out of necessity because we were a two-career family of going into planning. But I did have a very broad earth resource land use perspective, and recognized quickly in the field I was in that our suburban land use pattern was not sustainable, and it was costing society a great deal in auto dependence and carbon burning, in heating, in road maintenance, and in every way possible. And so that became sort of my cause célèbre. Was I was an early member of the Congress of New Urbanism, and in Northern California there were much more like spirits. And it was much easier to sort of evangelize in that direction in the planning field. When I moved to San Diego, after the kids went off to college and all, to help take care of my father, it was like going back in time. San Diego had not really caught up. And my career down here was a frustration because I'd already fought those battles with the engineers, with educated the public and brought everybody along, and then having to start over again in Chula Vista is where I first landed, just felt exhausting, But that was what happened. And now to see the trends happening nationally. When I realized the Koch brothers were funding sort of sabotage. In fact, APA had a secret, confidential teleconference to help train us in how to fight back against obstructionists, people that were being trained to come into community planning meetings and just kind of blow the process up. And, so the early part of my career was a blast. It got to be more and more of a frustration. And I feel bad for young people inheriting this, but my hope is that things always happen in sine waves. And we'll now hopefully see with people are learning that they can't deny that climate change is happening as we watch the wildfires in our state, for example, or the catastrophic flooding. And, I think they're starting to come around and have a harder time pretending like this isn't happening to us. So my hope is your profession gets a good shot in the arm out of that.
Well, you mentioned, yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were speaking about the oil spill in Santa Barbara being a catalyst for environmental change. And I was thinking about so many times people need to see what's going wrong to make change about it. And I think like you were talking about the sine waves and coming back to, now we see the wildfires, we see the extreme weather patterns. And, it's not going to be a quick change or easy fix, but that might be the catalyst for change to happen quicker.
Yeah.
And,
fingers crossed.
And, Nancy, as you're talking about the fun part and the progressive work and then coming back with the challenges, and Corinne, with your 16 years overlapping with probably the latter part of Nancy's career, I'm wondering what has been your perspective and where the industry was at when you started and where you're at today?
So I've been really lucky that my entire career, my focus has been renewable energy. So I've always, been able to, in a percentage of the, 60-hour work weeks, had so much of it be working on projects that I believe in. And, starting with the, big utility solar boom, and then, doing stuff now with wind and geothermal and energy storage and all of that. So it was easier to be buoyed by the, progressive, items because I got to work on so many of them. So, there's always, that's not to say, I'm a consultant. I work on everything. I've done, Costco's and my share of, development. That wouldn't be my selection. But to have that base where, so much of my time has been spent fighting for, projects that I do think are going to make a difference, has really helped me push through, I think, a lot of the challenges that my mom was talking about.
One area where we have not quite seen eye to eye, though, yet, she's starting to work on me this way, is I was always a person who was very fearful of nuclear energy. We lived through some of the big meltdowns and decommissioning of plants. And out of my studies at that time, it just seemed like a terrible alternative. How can we manage it? It won't work. And Corey has convinced me almost that we really don't have a choice. We really don't have a choice. There isn't enough energy,
baseload energy,
baseload alternative energy sources to support us that aren't, carbon related. So.
I hear you. And I appreciate you bringing up nuclear because that was one of the first projects I ever worked on with Corinne was the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station decommissioning planning efforts. Yeah. And I'm also giggling because when you're a consultant, you do work on everything. And with Corinne, we also randomly worked on a cybersecurity plan. I'm not an IT cyber expert, but we're good planners. So we just figure it out. It was totally wild. But and in the energy space, I find that for me, intergenerationally, that touches me because I come from an oil and gas family and a family of developers in that space. And so when I work on, like Corinne, when I work on nuclear, I work on wind and solar, energy storage and alternative types of energy storage and baseload geothermal power, it's I see the awakening happening among my parents, and also hopefully, I mean, my nieces and nephews are like, you're doing what now? With the what? And it's like going to be normal for them to have a very diverse portfolio of energy sources, and domestic at that, which is pretty awesome. So I would just contribute to the conversation that I think that that's how I've experienced change over time in my career, is seeing energy specifically being a really big sector. And I would assume you guys have experienced a lot of biological resources and wetlands changing over time. So Nancy, Clean Water Act, I feel probably was enacted.
That's a big one.
How? What's your big takeaway about how it's changed over time? And walk us through that a little bit.
I can't say I have a good perspective on it. I don't think I ever had to, you always had to deal through CEQA with, dust pollution, sediment reduction, all the things that we analyze. But I don't know that I've come up against the Clean Water Act. Fish and game regulations, endangered species regulations, all the layers of local government regulations.
Well, some of the first memories I have of Corinne working on wind energy are, I'll never forget the day you told me that we were going to think about putting cameras on turbines that could recognize bird species and stop the turbines from moving. I was like, this is amazing. So I just stuff like that just blows my mind about how a technical analysis under CEQA and impact analysis and mitigation measures can evolve over time and expand. And that's probably why we have bookshelves of
documents and
little bitty bits. But
well, and to that end, I still have some of her old textbooks in my bookshelf at my office, because they're so relevant. There's still some things that I go to from time to time.
Like the Congress of New Urbanism books, I'm sure are still hanging around there for sure. Well, to that end, have you guys ever collaborated on a project, not as free child labor being in photos, but have you ever actually collaborated on a project? And if no, do you want to? No.
So we never, I think we're in a position where we could, because with me being a private consultant and her being a public agency, staff member, there was always, the concern over having a either appearance of or very real conflict of interest. So we were always very careful if, even I would go have lunch with her in downtown San Diego or something, we'd make a point to we are paying separately and, doing that. So while she was still working, I just don't think that there was ever a time where we could have worked together. Because of that. But, we've worked on campaigns together. We've worked on, things outside of each of our, jobs. We've collaborated a lot. And I think that she's very happy in her retirement and probably would not want to come collaborate on any future work-related endeavors with me.
I think that's true. Because, one thing I did, we were breaking through a lot of social change. It was not that common when I raised these kids for women to be so quickly returned to the workplace with kids and all. And employers weren't as family friendly. And, there was a lot of monkey business going on back in the day. So, but working as I did, and you guys probably do the same. I had 60, when I was a city council member in Palo Alto and working for San Jose Redevelopment Agency, I had 80-hour work weeks. That was a 4-year stint. It was a lot of work. And then the campaigns took up more time, So by the time I got to be 60, I was pretty well done. And I've been offered work. And I've turned down almost every work offer that comes along. And when Corey asked me if I want to go out and do field work with her or something just for the kicks, I do go look at her projects. And she has some in wine country and stuff where we go wine tasting. It's great.
Yes.
But I'm not enthusiastic about getting involved.
You're a strategic engager when there are co-benefits of your partnership, such as wine. Totally understandable.
Thank you for joining the podcast on that note.
Exactly.
And I was thinking too, something I had a question about, this is kind of along the lines of, the family conversations. So you guys clearly talk about, what's going on in the world, what's going on in the environmental industry. So, we were talking before we recorded that we had some people who had some questions submitted to us. And one of the questions was, what's Thanksgiving like? What are you talking about at the dinner table? Is this, is this what you talk about? Is it what these big world and global issues? And yeah,
we actually do.
Yeah, all
we
the
get
time.
into it.
Thanksgiving Sunday dinner, dropping off, an item we bought them from Costco. We get into the debates pretty heavily.
We do. And a lot of times it's political discussions because the politics have been unfavorable. We've just seen some unfavorable situations for the things that we share in common getting accomplished. So I tend to be more moderate than Corey. She tends to be a stronger progressive than I am. But I'm just so proud of her and her energy for what she does. It's very great. But she can she's a debater. So there's that can get a little.
She's great, but
so does she get that from you or from her dad?
No, I think, she's picked up traits from both of us, and we couldn't be prouder of her. But I do notice it. She's good at what she does, which is win debates. So we tend to defer. After a while, we just say, "Okay, dear," but whatever you say.
It's really invaluable, especially throughout my career, to have had a sounding board that understands the vast majority of what I'm going through and what I'm saying, and to, be able to use the alphabet soup in front of someone and not have to stop for explanation or, just when I talk about a public meeting, she's been to, upteenth more than I have. And just to have that sounding board be a phone call away is just so important.
Sounds like it might be really nice that you've got empathy and understanding.
Yes.
Yeah. And not trying to have to convince another person of what you do is meaningful and relevant. And the acronym soup, you're really seen and heard. And I have to say, it's lovely to see the two of you together to have, a working professional role model to look up to, Corinne, and bounce ideas off, as you said, a sounding board. Beyond that, how do you show up for role models as others in the industry? I know how Corinne does because she has been a role model for me in many ways. Corinne, I'm so glad that you're proud of your daughter because I'm proud of her too. She does indeed dissent, and it's so helpful. This is a Corinne love sesh, but you did a great job. This is just a really great example of how families can learn from each other and grow from each other and really contribute to an industry in meaningful and positive ways. And Corinne has a leadership role on the San Diego chapter of AEP, and not just being an excellent chapter director and, working all the other roles that she did before that, but also launching a mentorship program at the state level of AEP across California. That is basically, the purpose of it is exactly what we're seeing on screen and hearing on the podcast right now, is to engage younger emerging professionals and bring the emeritus professionals and their wisdom and connect the two so that we can learn about emerging topics, but harness the power of the emeritus folks. And that's why I'm so proud of Corinne. And that's why I thank you, Nancy, for inspiring me to do that, because we really we wouldn't be there just yet, I don't think, without Corinne's enthusiasm and passion for
that's great to hear,
driving that change. Corinne, how do you feel about the mentorship program, and why was it meaningful for you to launch?
I'm so excited to, roll it out. I think, just shameless plug, we're looking at probably in the September timeframe, starting to put out notices, starting to collect interest. But why it was important to me is I've been so lucky to have, so many positive role models in my life. The very first and closest of one is my mom. But to, be able to give that experience to, all members of AEP is just invaluable. And, I think pairing it with our continued effort to increase our diversity, equity, and inclusion in a profession that, diversity has been a struggle to obtain, let alone equity and inclusion, I think it's just going to be so good for a profession that's in need of engaging new people and bringing up the class with us.
And I would say that my experience at the end of my career, the most positive experience I had was probably working with young interns. I started internship program in Chula Vista because I found that people didn't have time to do certain things. We needed to digitize databases, or we needed to, get some task done that nobody could fit into their day-to-day work. And here are these young kids that are willing to come in for a small budget and get the experience, and they're outstanding. I mean, they can do marvelous things. So that was a very successful and gratifying experience. And I ended up doing the same thing with the redevelopment agency in San Diego, bringing in. I always helped teach classes at UCSD, and then brought the students in the class in as interns to just learn how we were doing things. And it was very, very satisfying to get people excited about their land use planning class, where they, actually got to do something real. They were participating in something that was real. So that was a very gratifying part of the last part of my career. The other thing I found very satisfying was working in Southeastern San Diego in a part of the community that had been disinvested in traditionally, and becoming an advocate for that community and for environmental justice. And that was, I would say, an extremely rewarding end of career chapter. Very, very exciting.
Well, that said, Nancy, what's your goal for the profession? You've retired, you get to sit back and watch and only engage strategically with wine. And so what is your vision? Where do you want to see folks like Corinne and me and Jessa and students in high school and middle school? What do you want to see them accomplish on this earth?
Well, we thought we were going to, save the planet. That was our mission. And we didn't accomplish that. We've seen it. We've seen things happen that we never thought it would get to this point. So I guess my hope is not to have you guys carry the burden of that on your shoulders, because you'll just get depressed and burn out. But I do think that, if we continue our efforts, still have work-life balance, don't go overboard. I did a little too much of the overboard stuff, but I do think there's still a chance. Corey may disagree with me. She says the planet's burning, but we can retrieve it. I think we can bring it back, and find new ways of reaching everyone, so that people know this is a common mission. We have to switch lifestyle. It's a big thing to expect of people, but we've got to do it. And we've got to house a lot of people, and we've got to do it in a way that is sustainable. We've got a lot of challenges, and we've got to get our dependence on the automobile disconnected. We've got to find a way. Electric vehicles is one way, but public transportation is so critical. I'd like to see more and more people, teaching. My niece doesn't drive. She's a transit rider, teaching a new generation of kids how to use transit. I mean, that alone is an important objective, I think. And learning from other countries, being broad-minded enough to realize that there are places where many innovations have occurred that could really, work well here. And we just don't have to do it the same way we've always been doing it. And that's, so I would just encourage you all to continue doing what you're doing, but fight the good fight and break those barriers. There's more barriers to be broken, and restore faith in science. People need to resume their faith in science. Scientists, and I'm not sure, what the gap is there. I don't know why that. I think there was a huge campaign, a very conscientious campaign, to fight against science because it was not in the economic interest of many people.
Capitalism is why that happened.
Late stage capitalism.
Hashtag capitalism.
Yeah. But we do need to bring more balance into things. So, people say they don't. I went into science because I became a researcher because I didn't want to deal in politics. I didn't like politics. And what I discovered is that there's no more political community than the scientists. They're very political. So
I got into politics anyway.
I know. I was going to say, so then you got into public agency your whole life. Yeah.
I don't think you can escape it. I think it's just, it's with us. We have to learn how to communicate, learn how to educate, bring people along, talk to each other. I mean, I'm glad to hear you're from oil country and you're spreading your seeds. That's wonderful news.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ones that come after us are doing the same because a lot of folks in the new generations are willing to vocalize their experience with environmental justice, their direct experience oftentimes.
Yeah.
As we heard from our previous podcast guest, Lamika, who's our DEI consultant, and her just growing up in the neighborhood that she did with the asthma and all the air pollution problems, there's just no escaping it. So of course we'll get educated academically. Of course we will, but it's also that direct experience, I think, that really shapes people. Hence, Corinne living in a household like she did really, really shaped her. So Corinne, what is your vision, your goal? What do you want to accomplish in this profession?
So I'm probably going to give a fairly similar answer, but maybe get there in a different way. Is that we just need to do more, and time is running out. And where I struggle the most with this profession, especially the sliver of it that I do, is that we are supposed to follow the law. We enact the law. We do it. That is what we do. And until our laws are strengthened, and I think need to be strengthened very, very quickly, following the law is just not enough to, quote, save the world. And I do think that, without being facetious, that is what we need to do. And that is, the level of scale we're working on. So, it makes me and probably a lot of us uncomfortable to go in between being this, environmental consultant to being a personal advocate for changing laws, strengthening laws. But I don't see any other way to do that. So, I want to see changes to CEQA that, maybe there are some resource areas that you can't override. Maybe,
like water. When I moved down to Southern California, they do overriding considerations for water. You think, what could be yeah. I mean, it didn't make sense to me. That was outrageous.
Well, it's also funny because we're not really supposed to be here. I mean, the Colorado River is why we're here. Yeah, we're not supposed to be here, so we're just going to override.
Yeah. And environmental justice, I think it should absolutely be a CEQA resource area. And I think that's another one that you should prohibit overriding. If you are having a significant impact on an environmental justice community, your project probably shouldn't go through. Yeah. So, but again, I understand that it's hard to, by day practice CEQA, stand up in front of electeds, appointeds, and, present your findings. And then by night want to go to that same meeting and say, look, you guys need to adopt XYZ because what you're doing is just not enough.
It's a wild world. And of course we've got environmental consultants, we've got public agency members, and we've also got developers many times who want to build that renewable energy industry in California because there's all these incentives, including long duration energy storage. There's all these incentives. And now we've got our Inflation Reduction Act, as you had mentioned way earlier, Nancy. Yes. So we have all these incentives to come over here and build the things. And then you get the developers come in and CEQA blows their mind. The level of effort of engagement, impact analysis, compensatory mitigation, permitting. They think, I've got this permit. It's well, you need about 10 other ones. And then you pull one string and the rest of them all fall. And it's having to explain it to people who come into California, can be challenging. And I think that all the other states, not all the other states, I'm being dramatic, but a lot of the other states, they'll catch up. They always do. They always call us crazy over here and how we're overregulated and all these other things. And it's like, well, then you're going to have a disaster and your water's going to be bad and your air's going to be bad and you're going to catch on fire. And then you're going to come over to the dark side of CEQA life. And that's so nobody asked me, but I'm contributing that my vision for the profession is we really got to figure out this balance. I feel like we got to change the economy. And regulations is one way to force people to do that. But I think we got to change the economy. And I'm sure Jessa will agree with me too. We believe very strongly in voting with your wallet and consumer behavior being a big catalyst for change. And being an AEP member, we change policy. We have a legislative committee where we write and change policy. We're not an advocacy group, but we are a professional organization with lobbyists and professional folks in Sacramento. And so I just want to take this opportunity to show that AEP is a great way to accomplish your personal and professional objectives, should you feel so inclined. With that, I think we all do want the same vision for the profession. It's just a more robust, just bigger, better, stronger environmental stuff, right?
Right, exactly.
Goody. Well, I think this is a great time to wrap up Rapid Five, Jessa.
Yes. So and by we, I mean I will ask you these just rapid questions. And so I'll start with Corinne and then go to Nancy, and then I'll switch it up so you each get a chance to speak first. So Corinne, what is your favorite daily habit?
I love to read. So I will try to in the morning, 30, 45 minutes, an hour if I have it, have coffee, read my book, and then do the same thing in the evening, although without the coffee.
That sounds nice. Nancy?
For me, it's water exercise. I go to the Y with my husband, and we participate in a class that plays fun music, and we exercise that way, and it's fabulous.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay, so this time we'll start with Nancy.
Okay.
3 things you would bring to a deserted island.
3 things I'd bring to a deserted island. My husband, a library. I'd want a library and probably protein bars, maybe.
I was counting the people in your family. I was like, I feel like you have 3 family members.
I was like, she's retired. I was like, she's not taking her kids. Corinne, what about you? Or sorry.
My pets are 3 things. So that would leave my husband out. So I better pick him.
Okay. Corinne, what about you? Sorry.
No, I like the library idea. I'm going to steal that. I think a husband as well. And I don't know, maybe like, this is boring, but like survival kit to do like the hunting, the fishing,
to salinate.
Yeah.
Love it. You're looking to your mom as a role model, even when you're marooned. I love it. Okay. Now, Corinne, what is your favorite environmental policy?
So the low-hanging fruit is the Inflation Reduction Act because it's, new. It's the biggest piece of climate change legislation that any, country has ever passed. But wanting to put like my nerd hat on, it's probably the Bald and Gold Eagle Protection Act, because it was, and a problem was identified, legislation was passed. There are ways to implement it in a way that makes sense. It is doing its job, meaning that all the different, mitigation measures and compensatory mitigation, everything is working. Yet it is still able to, obtain permits easy enough. And it's just, I think, a more recent example of, similar to what my mom said with the ozone layer, where a problem was identified, legislation was passed, and it's working. And I think that we can use that as a model for future efforts.
Love it. Nancy.
I probably would say rare and endangered species. As much as people make fun of it, it does go to preserving habitat. I mean, we do have to look at what we're doing, and it has elevated our awareness about how we're connected to other species on the planet. And the land, the human impacts on them. And it's a divisive law as well. I know developers just grind their teeth about it, but I think it's done a lot. I think the Coastal Act is also a good one, though. I would claim California Coastal Act is a good model for public access and preservation of coastline, which we're going to need because the tide is coming up. It's going to be wiping out a lot of those private, beautiful homes.
As an aside to the Endangered Species Act, I one time asked a room full of ecologists what the big deal was about fairy shrimp. And I learned very quickly why that was a big deal. So, well, kind of on that same lines, Nancy. So what is your favorite flora or fauna?
My favorite flora or fauna? Well, I'll tell a story. I'll tell an anecdote of having the San Francisco garter snake on San Bruno Mountain. San Bruno Mountain is sort of south of San Francisco, and it was an area, we had a quarry that we reclaimed on the north side of San Bruno, and got to study there. But there's a garter snake that is rare and endangered and has been for a long time that looks like this placemat. I mean, it's got the colors. I'm going to pull this out. We'll put it back like that.
Yes,
it's
multicolored for those listening. Some multicolored stripes, very colorful.
Gorgeous.
Beautiful,
and
yeah.
I had a guy from Fish and Game come into a meeting where our guys hadn't been able to find these garter snakes and take a bag full of them and throw them on the table in the middle of the meeting. Now that was an impressive statement, and I'll always remember it as good move. That was impressive. He was one of the rangers or the Fish and Game guys. What are they? Wardens? Fish and Game wardens?
Wardens.
Yeah. He just went out and scooped up a bunch of them and said, "Come on, you guys. This is not hard to find." Whoa.
Bold.
So that's a favorite reptile. I take care of my little nephew now a lot. And so he's a dino fiend, and I'm sort of partial to reptiles out of his influence, I think.
Oh, look at that. Multi-generational up and down influence.
Yes,
I love it.
He wants to be a paleontologist and has since he was 3, I think, and could say the word. So at some point, Corey has promised to get him out on one of the little digs that's going on somewhere if we can ever get back to doing that.
As soon as they change those child labor laws, I can that's with my cruise.
Oh, those labor laws. All right, Corinne, what about you? Favorite flora or fauna?
So I would say dog and cat, just because I have a dog and a cat and I love them to death and they're my babies. But maybe one other thing is olive trees. Just being Arab American, and we're learning how to cure our own olives with the hope that we'll plant some olive trees, and just there's a lot of significance there. And then plus they do well in San Diego habitat naturally, and kind of starting to look at how to do that in our garden.
Yay, I love that. That's so fun. What a great hobby. Okay, or project, I should say. Corinne, our last one, finish this sentence or thought. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Wouldn't it be cool if the fair argument standard being applied to MNDs was eliminated in favor of the substantial evidence standard, like EIRs?
Mic drop, Corinne.
I don't know that I understood all of that.
You're not alone.
I was following every word. I was so excited. I was like, it could go either way. What is she going to drop the fair argument standard for? I really, really hope it's substantial evidence.
Well, I would.
Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
I would say, wouldn't it be cool if we were really able to unite as a global community and get a handle on global warming, as beyond the Paris Accord, beyond all that, but got really serious about it and managed to get everybody at the table to have an impact on it and figure it out, get it under control. That would be awesome.
Yes. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. It has been so fun. Thank you for joining us and conceptualizing the Intergenerational Series for us. This is,
Thank you for
we really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Before we pop off, I want to acknowledge and thank Corinne for acknowledging your heritage as an Arab American. Can you just take a quick minute or however long you want to share your bloodline and where they're from and what that means to you?
Sure. So my family was from Zaatlan, Lebanon. Came here. My grandmother was the first, U.S. born member of my family. And my great grandmother actually, we think, spoke Aramaic instead of Arabic, because a lot of the other Arabs on my family's side could never understand her. So
that's just a theory.
It's just that we're not sure. She didn't speak Arabic.
Yeah.
So there are not a whole lot of other languages to choose from.
Well, and when we traveled through that region, on the other side of the hill from where she lived, there was an Aramaic village. In that trip, but and ask, but so we that's the theory. We'll have to go back and check it out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Who knows who's listening is going to identify with your history.
Well, we joke that because we were, Christian Lebanese, and there are not that many of us out there. So most Christian Lebanese are all cousins at some point. Somehow. We'll probably have a cousin or two listening.
Love it. Shout out to the cousins. Thank you guys so much for sharing your wisdom and kicking off this intergenerational series in such a brilliant way.
Oh. No, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.